What if everything you believe about death is wrong? Do we dissolve into nothingness, or do we pass through portals to a new existence? Today, we'll dive into the Bardo Thodol, one of the most profound ancient texts in Tibetan Buddhism. It's not just a guide to understanding death, it also teaches us how to live with greater purpose and wisdom. Get ready. This isn't just another conversation about spirituality. It's an invitation to expand your mind, question your beliefs, and discover a deeper meaning to life and existence. Have you ever heard of the Bardo Thodol, also known as the Tibetan Book of the Dead? It's more than just a spiritual text. It's a true map for the transitions of the soul, filled with the mysteries of death and lessons on enlightenment. Written centuries ago, this guide challenges our Western understanding of the end of life and presents a new path, one where death is not an end but a portal to the pure light of consciousness. Think of it as a manual that, instead of teaching you how to live, teaches you how to die, and how to die well. It all begins with Padmasambhava, a legendary figure in Tibetan Buddhism. He wasn't just a spiritual master, but a true strategist of rebirth and spiritual transition. His mission: to tame the fears of death and guide consciousness toward liberation. It's fascinating to think that, while in the West we seek answers in laboratories, Padmasambhava looked inward, uncovering the mind's connection to the infinite. Carl Gustav Jung might call it a journey into the collective unconscious, a quest to understand what it means to be human on a spiritual level. The Bardo Thodol is divided into detailed stages corresponding to the moment of death, the intermediate state, and rebirth. Sound complicated? In a way, it is, but it's also deeply intuitive. Imagine a practical guide to facing the most challenging moments of existence. Ram Dass, famous for his work with spirituality and psychedelics, summed it up brilliantly. Death is like taking off a tight shoe. You're not losing anything, just freeing yourself from what limits you. But what makes this text so special? Unlike many religious teachings, the Bardo Thodol doesn't rely on dogma or rigid beliefs. Instead, it invites us to explore the void, a profound concept in Tibetan Buddhism that challenges us to see beyond the illusions of samsara. In practice, this means confronting our fears, attachments, and even our shadows, understanding that everything is transient. Jung believed that facing our shadows was essential to achieving wholeness, and the Bardo Thodol would agree. You might be thinking, this is amazing, but how does it apply to my life? The beauty of the Bardo Thodol is exactly that. It's a reflection of the mind, and by studying it, you begin to understand the patterns that govern your choices. For instance, why not set aside a few minutes each day to contemplate the void, practicing meditation, and exploring your own pure light? It's a simple but powerful way to align your consciousness with the essence of the text. Now picture this. The human mind, at the moment of death, is described in the Bardo Thodol as standing before an immense, pure, overwhelming light. What would you do? Run away or surrender? That same light is available in our daily lives, but we're often distracted by the superficial. Padmasambhava invites us to stop, breathe, and recognize that this light is our essence. This isn't the end, but just the beginning of a journey that will teach us how to live fully to prepare for the transition. After all, isn't it curious how much death can teach us about life? Preparing for death might sound like a heavy topic, but in the Bardo Thodol, it's presented as one of the most liberating practices we can embrace. Padmasambhava taught that facing the impermanence of life isn't an invitation to fear, but a call to wisdom. After all, what happens when we accept that everything around us, people, possessions, even our bodies, is in constant change? This awareness frees us from samsara, connects us to the clear light, and teaches us that the true essence lies in the void. For many, thinking about death is uncomfortable, but in Tibetan Buddhism, it's seen as a powerful teacher. Ram Dass once said that life is like a school, and death is the final exam. If we don't study, we show up unprepared. That's why spiritual practices like meditation, contemplation, and detachment become essential. Imagine setting aside 10 minutes a day to simply observe your breath and ask yourself, what binds me? This small exercise can reveal a lot about the fears and attachments blocking your path to enlightenment. The Bardo Thodol describes that at the moment of death, the mind enters a state of deep receptivity. This is where preparation during life makes all the difference. Meditation, for example, teaches us to recognize our thoughts without being dominated by them. Experienced practitioners learn to accept the clear light as part of themselves, while the unprepared might shrink back, trapped in fear. You can start with guided meditations or even readings from spiritual texts that help quiet the mind, like those of Ram Dass or Eckhart Tolle. Preparation isn't just about individual practices, but also about how we live our relationships. Carl Jung believed that our psyche is like a mirror. The conflicts we have with others reflect the ones we have with ourselves. In the context of the Bardo Thodol, this means that by resolving our emotional tensions and forgiving, we free ourselves from karmas that could trap us in the cycle of rebirth. Think of someone you hold a grudge against. What if this were your last chance to forgive them? It's a transformative exercise. Another important aspect is the practice of detachment from material things. Padmasambhava taught that what we own also owns us. How often have you felt you needed something to be happy? What if, instead of accumulating, you tried to simplify your life? Donate clothes, let go of objects that no longer have meaning, and practice gratitude for what truly matters. These actions not only bring lightness, but also prepare the mind for the spiritual transition, where the only thing we take with us is our consciousness. Finally, think of death as a continuous learning process. Just as a tree loses its leaves in autumn to be reborn in spring, we also go through cycles of life and death at every moment. Padmasambhava reminds us that by living with presence and awareness, we are preparing for the last great cycle. But what about you? Have you started your preparation journey? If not, now might be the moment to take the first step. After all, as they say, the best time to start was yesterday, and the second best time is today. In the context of the Bardo Thodol, karma isn't some kind of divine punishment. It's the natural reflection of our actions, thoughts, and intentions. Padmasambhava, with his profound wisdom, taught that everything we do leaves an imprint on the universe, not as a punishment but as a simple consequence. Every choice we make is like tossing a stone into a lake. It creates ripples that spread outward and eventually return to us, shaping our journey and spiritual transition. Recognizing this dynamic allows us to make more conscious decisions aligned with the pure light of our essence. Carl Gustav Jung, one of the greatest psychoanalysts of all time, believed that our actions, or inactions, create reflections in the collective unconscious. According to Jung, these energies, which we call karma, remain stored within us and continue to manifest until we integrate them. In the Bardo Thodol, this idea takes on a new perspective. If we're not aware of our actions, they can keep us trapped in the cycle of samsara, causing us to reincarnate and repeat the same patterns of suffering. The key is to observe our choices, reactions, and, of course, our intentions. How can we apply this knowledge to daily life? Imagine that every action you take is a seed, whether a good deed or a negative thought. Each seed you plant will bear fruit. For example, if you choose to practice patience in a difficult situation, You'll cultivate positive karma that will support your spiritual transition. On the other hand, if you give in to resentment or anger, you're nurturing negative karma that might resurface later, bringing challenges to your journey. The Bardo Thodol teaches us that we are responsible for our path, and the key lies in how we choose to live right now. Karma, therefore, isn't something that only comes into play at the moment of death. It follows us throughout our lives. In the Bardo Thodol, this karma is depicted as one of the primary determinants of what happens to the soul after death. If we've been immersed in ego, attachment, and fear, our choices will lead us to a distorted vision during the Bardo Thodol, the intermediate state. But if we've practiced compassion, detachment, and wisdom, the clear light of the mind will be easier to recognize, guiding us to spiritual freedom. Now, imagine a daily situation where you have the chance to change your karma, a moment of conflict with someone. Instead of reacting with anger or resentment, you choose to respond with understanding and calmness. What does that create? A wave of good energy that not only transforms the situation, but also influences your future. By living with the intention of purifying karma, we create a clearer path for our soul, not just in life but also at the moment of death. Every good deed, every positive thought, is preparation for the great portal of spiritual transition. The Bardo Thodol teaches us, simply and directly, that we are constantly shaping our destiny. The seeds we plant today, through our actions and thoughts, will determine the type of experience we'll have at the moment of death and, consequently, at rebirth. If we want to traverse the Bardos with wisdom and achieve enlightenment, we must start cultivating a consistent practice of mindfulness and self-observation now. What seeds are you planting today? Are you ready to take responsibility for your actions and thoughts? The journey to true freedom begins with a choice, and that choice is yours. When we talk about the Bardo Thodol, we need to understand that it's much more than just a spiritual guidebook. It describes a journey through death and the afterlife in 3 distinct phases, known as Bardos. Each Bardo represents a unique yet interconnected stage of spiritual transition. The first of these Bardos, the Bardo Chikai, is the moment of death, where the soul encounters the clear light for the first time. This marks the starting point of the whole process, the first big choice, where, if the soul is able to recognize the light, it can achieve instant liberation. However, this phase is not simple. The mind tends to cling to everything it knows, and the light might appear as frightening or threatening. Padmasambhava, when creating the Bardo Thodol, knew that the vast majority of souls wouldn't be ready to recognize this clear light. Fear and attachment to this world would be too strong. So, he proposed that in the Bardo Chikai, the soul experiences a dissolution of the self. The physical body falls apart, and consciousness is freed from material limitations. This is where the key to proper preparation comes in: spiritual practice throughout life. Recognizing the clear light is the real test, because it requires a detached mind, ready to surrender to the vastness of emptiness. Preparation doesn't happen at the moment of death, but throughout life as we cultivate awareness and inner stillness. The second Bardo, the Bardo Thodol, is where things get even more complex and fascinating. Here, the soul experiences visions from its own mind, whether peaceful or frightening. These visions reflect the karmic tendencies that haven't been overcome yet: fears, desires, and unresolved attachments. Carl Jung, when talking about the archetypes of the psyche, reminds us that these visions are not external entities, but internal projections. In the Bardo Thodol, the soul faces these amplified projections, making the experience even more intense. If the soul is unaware that these visions are just reflections of its own mind, it might get lost in them. Once again, Padmasambhava provides guidance in the Bardo Thodol. The visions in the Bardo Thodol can be peaceful or wrathful. Peaceful visions reveal the purity of the mind, an image of everything benevolent and enlightened. However, if the soul cannot handle the serenity of these images, it is pulled into the realm of wrathful visions, which represent the darker aspects of the psyche, like anger, fear, and desire. The key here is detachment. The Bardo Thodol suggests that the soul, realizing that these visions have no external reality, should focus on the clear light, which remains unchanged by all the projections of the mind. This is the opportunity for liberation. The third Bardo, the Bardo Sidpa, deals with the crucial moment of choice, rebirth. In the Bardo Sidpa, the soul is guided by its karmic tendencies, attracted to images of new life possibilities, as if choosing a new body, a new cycle. This is a vital decision point. If the soul isn't sufficiently aware, it will be swept away by its desires and fears, choosing a new body that reflects unresolved energies from the previous life. The Bardo Thodol warns that if the soul can recognize this cycle, it can choose not to be reborn, achieving enlightenment and liberation from samsara. The true depth of the Bardo Thodol lies in applying these teachings to everyday life. The three phases described, the Bardo Chikai, the Bardo Thodol, and the Bardo Sidpa, are actually representations of our own spiritual journey, of the transitional moments we experience throughout life. What happens after death is merely a continuation of what we're already going through now. Therefore, it's essential that, as we prepare for this final journey, we don't just do it on an intellectual level, but with daily practices of meditation, self-awareness, and detachment. When we live these teachings while we are alive, our experience at the moment of death and during the spiritual transition will be much calmer and clearer. Self-knowledge, in the context of the Bardo Thodol, is the key to navigating spiritual transitions with awareness and wisdom. Padmasambhava knew that the human mind is full of illusions, and it's only by unmasking them that true enlightenment becomes possible. But what does it actually mean to know oneself? It's not just about understanding our preferences or habits, but about looking within and seeing what's holding us back from living fully. Self-knowledge is the path to emptiness, the space where there are no attachments, where there's no fear of death, because by knowing oneself, you transcend the cycle of rebirth and find peace. Carl Jung, in his writings, talked about the importance of integrating the shadow, that part of the psyche we usually try to hide from ourselves. The shadow, like the wrathful visions in the Bardo Thodol, is not something external, but a projection of our own repressed emotions. When we don't acknowledge these darker parts of ourselves, they control us. Self-knowledge, therefore, is the process of bringing these shadows into the light, making them conscious, and freeing ourselves from the illusions they create. By looking at these dark parts with understanding and compassion, we find the path to true freedom, both in this life and after death. The Bardo Thodol teaches us that when the soul encounters the clear light after death, it faces the truth of its essence. This light is not something external, but reflects who we really are. Thus, self-knowledge is not a process of discovery, but of revelation, a process of peeling away the layers of false identities we've created to protect ourselves from fear, judgment, and pain. If we can live authentically, true to our essence, we'll reach the moment of death prepared to recognize the clear light as our own nature, and not as something distant or fearful. To integrate self-knowledge into daily practice, there's no magic formula. However, meditation is one of the most powerful tools we can use. By silencing the mind, we begin to observe our thoughts without identifying with them. This creates a space between our true essence and the layers of conditioning we've accumulated throughout life. The practice of observing without judgment is the key to disidentifying from the ego and getting closer to the clear light that, according to Padmasambhava, is always available to us. A good starting point is to meditate for 10 minutes a day, focusing on the breath and allowing thoughts to come and go without clinging to any of them. Another deep exercise is to question our own motivations. When you act, ask yourself, where is this action coming from? Is it from a place of love and compassion, or from fear and desire? This kind of self-reflection helps dissolve the layers of ego and allows you to live more authentically. By understanding your deeper intentions, you begin to align your life with your true essence, without being influenced by past conditioning or the fear of the future. This is what Padmasambhava calls entering the clear light, recognizing your divine nature and acting from it. Self-knowledge is also about accepting the impermanence of all things. The Bardo Thodol teaches us that death is not something to be feared, but understood as part of the cycle of life. When we can accept that our existence is transient, we begin to live more fully. Self-knowledge gives us the freedom to not fear the end, but to live each moment intensely, knowing that we are constantly in a process of rebirth, not only after death, but every new day. True enlightenment, therefore, is realizing that, by knowing ourselves deeply, we transcend death and spiritual transition, achieving freedom. Now that you've caught a glimpse of what happens after death, I ask you, how are you preparing for this journey? Have you reflected on your karma, your actions and intentions? The wisdom of the Bardo Thodol teaches us that death is not something to fear but a transition, an opportunity for self-knowledge and liberation. Each of us is constantly creating the conditions for our spiritual journey, and every decision, every thought, contributes to the path we walk. That's why I invite you, start now to live with greater awareness, to let go of what doesn't serve you, and to seek what truly matters. Write in the comments what you think about rebirth and the journey of the soul. Share this video with someone else who is also searching for answers, and let's continue this conversation. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss the upcoming videos exploring these profound mysteries. Life is short, but spiritual lessons are eternal. Reflect on what you've learned here and share this journey with the world. We are all on the same path, and together we can uncover what lies beyond the veil of death.